Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for the previous talk by Kerstin. Very enlightening. I am here to introduce someone from Belgium, Renaud Haerlingen, who arrived last night and has been robbed and everything and had good food with us and had a crazy start in Basel, but I'm happy he made it. I'm happy he made it to speak here today with his lecture that he prepared. Renaud studied architecture in Delft and Ghent, I think, and joined a company called Rotor in 2010, if I can trust the internet, and was later the co-founder of a spin-off of Rotor, Rotor DC, Rotor Deconstruction, in 2016 in Brussels, and his stages previous to his work with Rotor and Rotor DC range from developments or design developments in the Middle East to his engagement in a collective in Brussels, and I think also a postgraduate program in international politics. So all of which suggests a very wide understanding and interest of what he or maybe we as trained architects can or maybe should pursue. I leave it to you to explain what Rotor actually does, what you're interested in. I'm very, very curious and I'm happy you're here. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Renaud, I'm coming from Belgium. Actually, we loved the invitation and the framing of a student year-long to beyond concrete and avoiding concrete in the thinking, in the proposal, in the process, or justify concrete. So we came, two of us, Tristan Boniver, who is also one of the founders of Rotor, and we were very happy to share with you the symposium and also the drink at the end, and we are there to support the framing of this year with a lot of enthusiasm. Yeah. I will present to you or to talk to you about the work of Rotor, which seems to touch the subject of the circulation of material, but also this preoccupation of our generation. It started for us in 2005, but it's gaining momentum at different stage in the work. And 2 years ago, we were invited to a talk at the Barbican in London, and the title was The Architecture of Emergency, and there was this kind of dramatic communication about it. We were not very comfortable or captivated by this kind of communication, and we joined, but with the kind of proposition that this poster feels like a much more inspiring vision of a radical change, of some radical change. And what we see in the poster is ceramic tiles that have been reclaimed and reused and put into a publicly funded project of a series of apartments. And that feels like something not common or not easy or challenging or raising a lot of questions along the work Rotor is doing. And those tiles to be there in the poster means that they have been reclaimed and recovered there, which means that a decision to collect them had to be made in this space where there is the dust, there is the graffiti, and decision makers had to be there or close enough to that to be able to make that decision. And then when you take that decision, actually you start to collect tiles, but if you look carefully, you still have the cement mortar along the edge. You don't have a product ready to use. You just start to have something. And the next step, it's a process that we do at Rotor Deconstruction, but other people in the world do it. It's basically bringing them in a bath with a soft acid, which is acetic acid, vinegar, and it dissolves the cement, And then you get with a high pressure water cleaning with recycled water, by the way. But, you start to have a project. Okay, so, and then it starts to be interesting. You look carefully at the product. You can recognize information. It's a Serabati. It's a type of product that is still produced. That has a market value. But it's also a product that comes with its own history, its own documentation, its own culture, and that starts to be something else in the process. And then that was the moment that started to be impressive and satisfying for us. It was laid and put into place in a new construction, in a new project that has gone through all of this construction process. Maybe the feeling of scalability that is there is part of our satisfaction. Of course, sorry, the presentation of Kerstin just showed a lot of materials that reach this. And that was kind of the poster. Maybe this echoes the work that Rotor has been doing under the name or under the umbrella of Opalis. And Opalis is an inventory of the people who are already doing, making a circulation of construction material, who are doing this kind of circular economy. And for all of these families of material, the same story still already happens. It's already there today in this world. And that was something interesting for us. Since 2010, we started to check where and how it was already registered, inscribed in our real economy, that circular economy was happening. Because we had the feeling that even though it's not in the city center, and maybe if there are small actors, they have a very huge and very real and very material expertise. There is something that is not about information, it's about the weight of architecture and materials. And so we started to go and explore and visit them, and we published this, and it's published as of today, the presentation of all the economic actors who do that. And for each of them, there is a description of who they are, what they do, and also visuals that can share the more multi-faceted appreciation we could do when we were on site. It's kind of making the gap between the city and the decision-making table and those very small actors. But because there is this preoccupation to have more material circulating, it feels like an appropriate entry in the question. Since a few years, the website is also presenting a collection of projects that do the story, having materials being reused and put into architectural project or construction project. The expert I just mentioned, it's basically those people. Sometimes you would not expect that they are the expert, but from this circular economy, we like to appreciate that they are the expert for us. And it's also very interesting to notice that they are not ideas, they are not concepts, they are not subsidized, they are economic actors. They are very small companies. Many are one person, some are slightly bigger, some specialized in materials, some provide very little service. But they are all economic actors in today's world. And so again, this idea of a starting point to understand the state of the art of the question is something. And in 2010, it was started for Belgium. But for the last 3 years, we've been applying for an Interreg research funding, and it has been with partners expanded on the UK, the Netherlands, and part of France. And there was already open conversation about expanding also to Switzerland. And there is about 1,500 companies registered. There are about 3,000 ready to be registered. So you can visit opalis.eu, but mostly for the students, I hope I will ask Axel and the host to share that with you. So it gives you a very practical place to go and explore. Maybe you don't see for Switzerland, but you can look around. It's quite similar across the Western world economy, with some specificity in different regions. It's something that is explored with students in London. It's still a field to be explored, but it's a starting point. Like it was said by Axel, Rotor spinned off a company doing that ourselves, which is Rotor Deconstruction. Around 2015, we noticed that the low-hanging fruits that feeds the project of In Situ are there in a large quantity. And for some reason, none of the actors available on Opalis could handle some specific batch of materials or some specific type of construction operation. And we felt that at Rotor, with our skills in architecture, also the strengths of a group of people working on that with dedication and different talents, already more than 12 people at the time, maybe we had the power to enter into the game and do it ourselves. And so we started to collect first in kind of commercial architecture, commercial building, office space, which are high in turnover of changing and from their own reason, not the obsolescence of material. And today in Brussels, we have a shop with a team working and trading the materials. And there is a website where you can see this. What was interesting is to understand that we had to recognize with ourselves that it had an impact, because somehow the first time we did that, it was Operation Triomphe. It was one office building, 8 floors, and we just touched some materials on 3 floors within the time window that we had. And we saved 30 tons of materials. And when we looked back for the 9 years before that, Rotor had been doing a series of medium, small projects, but we have been published, we have been noticed in the architecture field with projects that integrated reuse material. But actually, we saved over all of this course of time 24 tons of material. And then suddenly in 3 weeks, we had made 30 tons of material. And so that forced us to start Rotor Deconstruction and also to accept that we started to speak other language, speak with other people, find ourselves in other conditions, other situations. And we learned to enjoy that. And sometimes we really enjoy, often we really enjoy. Sometimes it's the journey of our life. And the impact, it was just said by Kerstin, but it's actually significant. Like on this building that it was the second project, more or less. We made the calculation of the environmental impact of what we could collect, which was still the low-hanging fruits on one operation. And it was 24 tons of materials. And when we convert with some, we use Dutch reference at the time because there is a problem that many references are possible to use about this. So at Rotor, we kind of not do the translation too fast because it's not our goal to put a big or small number. It's just our goal to make it happen and to change around us. But the impact was equivalent to 70 square meters of photovoltaic cell over 25 years. It was just one small operation giving us a few days before the stripping of the building. And when we look, this 25 years of photovoltaic panel was a high point in the communication of this building owner, which is the biggest building owner in Brussels or one of the main. And so we know all of us that we had this communication about, we have a plan of photovoltaic panel on our building over this time. And they start to understand. And it's nice to see that in their communication now, they mention, following the collaboration between Befimo and Rotor, 10 tons of building material were recuperated, and they mentioned that. And as a quoted company, they're on the stock market, they need to publish every year an annual report. And we noticed that the collaboration with Rotor came before the photovoltaic discourse. And that was kind of, things are slightly being understood. since we speak to architects here and professionals, I also want to say that very soon after those first operations, we were invited to collect or to assess and collect materials in this building in Brussels. It was the headquarters of a very prestigious bank. And when you go inside, you see very, very beautiful granite designed by a known architect, Jules Waps, and very precious wood on the stairs and all of this. And you say, okay, no, it's definitely worth it. So we started to rent a warehouse and equip ourselves to be able to do that. That there was a beautiful false ceiling on the top, and it's worth being done. But you have to understand that you don't go into that job like it's just inspiring and I go. When you know this building, actually there is 6th floor below. There is a metro tube going on the 3rd floor below. It's below the water level of the city. So if you make something wrong, before you know, you would have the pit full of water. You have to be able to read the construction documents, to do the reverse engineering and to organize with the people in charge of the operation. And so it really felt like a high-level architectural work that we were touching here. And we were very happy to have like architecturally trained people surrounding us at Rotor. You also have to be able to read the concrete quality or the load capacity on the floor of the building, because when you stack the granite stone that we've seen before, very soon on a pallet, you have more than 500 kilograms per square meter. So you cannot put a pile of stone and cross and go. No, you have to take them 5 by 5 or to choose the path. And so all of this come into the reverse engineering operation. You also have to be competent and have the discipline to understand the risk, and that's the asbesto mark in the construction. And so you want to know the safety measure and not collect the material that are close to a risk, because there is no interest in saving a stone against this kind of risk. And it means that we have us, here are colleagues from Rotor, all of them would be like me giving lectures and being in many situations that you would not expect them to dress like this, but we need this kind of mind capacity to engage with the field. And we do the job from those positions one day and from this position today, and actually it implies a lot of this. All in all, the story is kind of integrated in the current narrative about circular economy. It's something that is there. We are very often invited in relation to this subject. We have kind of table and information about the validity, the assessment of the relevance to do this for several materials, for ceramic tiles, the new one, the reused ones, for reclaimed steel. It's a huge impact. There are kind of guides for the quick wins where you can make savings in the project. There are also informations about the distance impact in comparison to the production site of the new materials, so that you can evaluate it. Up to that distance, it's relevant to make it with reused material, which is for aluminium extremely high. So you could take 12,000 kilometers away reused aluminium, it would still be better. And probably your aluminium is also produced very far, so you can add up. And we work on that. We have a group of people, or sometimes it's the same people, but it's one branch of Rotor doing research and collecting the experience on that. And we have 2 documents that are at the draft version now within the FCRBE, so facilitating the recirculation of construction material. We have 2 guides that I will also share with you as a kind of tools, maybe for surfing around the beyond concrete restriction of this year. One is a guide for identifying the reuse potential of construction products. It will be the final publication in a few months, but the draft is already published and available. And we have a second guide that was done over the last 3 years for facilitating the integration of reclaimed building materials in large-scale projects and public tenders. And so it covers strategies, approach, problems that are raised, and for which one there are strategies or possibilities. And I invite you to look at the circulation of construction material, maybe through those tools and all what the school will give you along this year. At the same time, we are engaged with this question since 2005. I was like professionally engaged with the question since 2010, but we also have constantly and very precisely a critical perspective on the circulation of material and the question that comes. And 2 years ago, I think some colleagues made a small exhibition in Brussels called Life Under a Cherry Tree. And in that exhibition, they brought together a collection of building material that strongly resist reuse. And you had like this postmodern lamp with halogen, and they don't resist reuse because they are difficult to dismantle. They resist reuse because there is no market, there is no demand, there is the relamping or the technology that has changed for a real better at the moment. Or we have the roof ceiling in cement asbestos, and the asbestos is captured, but there is every good reason to not reuse it at the moment. The glass panel in office partition wall, we tried. We are very happy when we see now the manufacturer also trying, but it doesn't reach a market competitivity. The fiberboard melaminated panel also, it's very easy to take, but it doesn't reach marketability. And the exhibition was completed with these families of concrete tiles or some kind of insulation and carpet that they resist. Toilet bowl or these technical columns, they are there. We also highlighted in the exhibition a quote from an architect in 2005, a Belgian architect that is the authors of many of the projects in which we've been collecting materials. And we were surprised or impressed to see that in a professional journal he was writing, when we will then demolish our current buildings that will have become obsolete without regret. Such an evolution will undoubtedly be a radical answer to another developmental need. The excavators of today and tomorrow will replace what fires, earthquake, and wars did in the past. And so what is produced, what is the building we are invited into them, feels that some of them, maybe more than we think, have been built in such kind of mindset. And yeah, I lost one slide. I don't know why, but the conclusion of the exhibition was that our feeling at Rotor is that the circular economy, like it's publicized today, it's not at the level of the question that our generation is asking. And it's mobilized maybe for a conspicuous consumption, but there is every reason to have doubts. And at Rotor Deconstruction and with Opalis net sector, we only touch a small fraction of material. And so still we do it, still we like to do it. And we accepted that it's mainly something that is accepted as a common sense practice. And even though it's kind of difficult or a survival quality of means that are given to this job, this societal contribution, it feels that it gives us a position to think the future, to think about the questions that are still there. And it should not be confused with a solution. It is mainly, it feels like a good place for many reasons to think and to start the thinking about the new future. But we don't know what are the shifts or the things that need to move for those new future to come. And that's why we like to speak with architects, and we like to do, we dedicate or care to do works in architecture or the periphery of architecture to see where it takes us. The fact that we've been engaged and working on all of that with the seriousness that I try to highlight until now in the presentation is probably for a large part what made us possible to work on a series of projects where there is probably not a lot of reused materials, but what they are is probably possible because we are the kind of guys who do Opalis or who use reused material in some project. And I will use the rest of the presentation to tell 5 stories of 5 projects that are in this field of the work of Rotor. It seems that they all touch a bit about concrete in an inspiring way, maybe. And if you are still hungry about concrete, for much more concrete at the end, I will invite you to look or to find D'Aquasu et tutta un'altra cosa that I will not present today, but which is a project we did for the Manifesta Biennale in Palermo 2 years ago. And first project is the story of the project Greenbacken. Greenbacken is an infrastructure in Ghent, a small city in Belgium, and they opened a competition to repurpose an infrastructure along the canals that used to be serving the concrete industry. Basically, it was to collect the sand and the grain and the gravel from the boat and then to load the trucks. And a young designer, a young artist, and a young architect won the competition, and they proposed to have it wide, to make openings, to provide some service like electricity and water, and to have it as a public space, a new beginning or new something fresh. And then they called us and they said, oh, Rotor, would you like to be the first to do an installation into that? We have a small budget for that. And we had the feeling, maybe we are wrong. Huh? I don't know if we checked if this feeling was the appropriate one. But we had the feeling you will build something there with reused material, so it's not too much guilty. We were not inspired by that. We felt like that's not enough of a reason. But we after opening the mail, we looked at Google Earth and we started to see what was the situation there before they started to do the repurposing, the reconstruction work. Said, interesting. So we went, because it's not that far, 3 colleagues of us, Tristan, myself, and Lionel at the first day. And we looked, one was filled. Yeah, it was starting to be inspiring. And actually, Lionel, which is one of our colleagues, is a bioengineer by training. And he started to look at the lichens. And he said, Renaud, Tristan, come. Basically, I recognize this one. If with a little bit of search, I could tell you when the first Chinese boat came here. Because it's this mushroom and this bacteria, and they go this speed, and I know this. And we were like, this is so cool. At the end, he made the job, and he found the name of every lichens on the concrete. And we start to understand that we had something very precious in our hand. And also, we noticed one of these little plants. And actually, it's the plant that is promoted in Ghent at the time, or it's still, for a green roof. So in architecture, we promote this plant that actually it's there, and it was to be wiped out, to be white and a new beginning. And so we said, yeah, okay. And so we build with new materials. We said, okay, we will built to protect you from the white. And we will set up an exhibition of what is already there. And of course, when you want to paint white a concrete like this, you have to do a high pressure with sand cleaning. So it's quite aggressive, and then spray paint. So we had to make very tight enclosing to protect the qualities. Of course, you didn't want to have drill in the thing that you will display because you care for what you display. And so that was the challenge, and that's how we spent the budget. And of course, this one was just beautiful because the water had been moving there. So there was a collection of graffiti that was kind of curated. This room, we used it to explain the story of the concrete and the submerged concrete. So we went and engaged with the people at the university, and we made a very clear explanation about this process of the corrosion for the public who would visit the space. And that's what it became. And it creates this kind of space. When the work was done, of course, the trace of pouring the concrete was highlighted here. I turned the presentation about the concrete today because of the title. There could have been other. We really like this kind of moment that we created for the opening of having this lady looking at the explanation on the spray can and the spray brand they use for graffiti, and with other people. Suddenly we felt like able to create something that we would not have the skills or the tools to do with any new or not new materials. So, and of course the green roof plans was explained and kept through the process. And then this is the part. Okay, I go to another story. This is the building here. I don't know if I here, owned by the family of Galeries Lafayette in Paris, and it's nearby the Centre Pompidou in the Marais, in the center. And they decided to turn this building into their own art foundation, and they called us. Oh, sorry, this one. They called us and said, okay, we want to organize an event here with high-profile people, thinkers, to think about the future of the foundation. We want this meeting to happen over 2 days in the building itself, because it will be an inspiration. But the building has been used for decades by different tenants. It's not nice. Maybe you at Rotor, you would be able to deal with what is there and do a scenography for the meeting. We said, okay. We said, basically, they invited us to contribute also to comment what the foundation should do. And they said, okay, the work you do at Rotor is inspiring for many reasons. What do you want to tell us? And we said, basically, when you gave us the key to visit the building, there was written anti-squat on the key. And what we've been able to do in Brussels very often was because we had a little bit of space. The price of the land is not that high that even in the city you can try things. And the people we know in Paris, they have so small space that they cannot try many things that we. And so we said, if you want to support creativity, art, maybe the 3 years we have between now and the new project, which is a beautiful new project prepared and designed by OMA, we could open the space and share it with people, because there is no real estate value for that moment. So the rent could suddenly be looked from a completely different perspective. And we proposed them to do an anticipation time of the building. And we said, okay, we have the budget of a scenography. We will come for 20 days with 8 people and the tools. And the 4,000 square meters of the building, we will reshuffle in a way that it's polite to give the key to people. They trust us, not the same day. At the meeting, they were blank. 3 days later, they send a mail. It's wise what you proposed. We were sure that we only had that to say. So we were ready to wait for a few days before a mail coming back. And we explained that in the center of the building, there was this kind of auditorium. It was used for preparation school in Paris. So there was a series of auditorium. On another floor, it was other tenant. And said, okay, this is heavily connoted. It's not inspiring. It's not fresh to go because it's an auditorium. It's saturated. The ceiling is not aligned, and it's a bit dirty. But actually, if you take this space, you remove the false ceiling, you have a kind of historic atrium. Just the shape and the space of it is inspiring. And if you have an auditorium and you desaturate the quantity of seatings, because you don't need to put a maximum amount of students in the room, the space is not the same problem. It's as an auditorium, it's old and connoted with previous usage. As another kind of space, it's not the same point. And so the work was to just work on the connotation. We decided we will just remove the previous connotation, the weight of the previous usage when it's a bad connotation. Not the materiality itself is a problem for us. And so the first day we started with this room. That was one level that was used to train the people from the Bon Marché, which is a department store a few streets from there. It feels like a 90s office space. Said, okay, actually it's the age where they were putting false ceiling to cut the windows because the comfort, the modernity, but also the heating preoccupation. But as a creative space, it doesn't need to be that. And we said, okay, we will just shift, recover the level, and the space will be something completely different. And actually, many people liked the space just after that. And another one, it was the first floor was this series of auditorium. And we said, okay, if we are proposing to invite creative people, there will be moment of display, a larger space would be nice. And we said, we will remove all the walls here. Let's remove the walls. But then we suddenly understood that if we remove all the walls, we have no furniture. There is no budget to build anything, to add something. So we restrained ourselves and we said, we will cut it at 60, the wall, so that you have already a bench and it's a bit higher than the few chairs that will be there for an opening. And so the people that will sit on the bench, the wall will be a little bit higher. It's the ergonomy we feel relevant. And so we said, okay, let's cut it at that level. And also it allows us to cut around the problem. Like it was good to keep the heating and not to have kind of a dilemma at that moment. And indeed we cut, the wall was a kind of particle board with holes double level. It was not very stable. So we used the quick step, so the plastic flooring system of the director office to make a formwork, and we poured a little bit of concrete to have an edge. And so we just add a little bit of concrete here, and we choose to paint one level of one layer of white on the vertical surface, so that in photo it looks white. When you were on site, it was not perfect white, but on photo, if you display something and you capture the image, you have something proper. And so that was the space. And of course, it happened what needed to happen. There were not enough chairs, and it became the furniture of the project. The third room in that project was on the third floor. It felt like the most comfortable room. That's where they wanted us to do a scenography. We have the impression. It was the office space of Mode magazine, a French mode magazine. And so it was refreshed, white and black, halogen, false ceiling. It felt like, okay, very 2000, almost okay. It was like just okay for them to invite their guests there. And so for a long time we were, is there a problem here? Is it good there? And then we understood it's a FL building, the structure. And we said, actually this false ceiling, even though it's perfectly working and clean, is a connotation of the years 2000 or around that time. It's not the project. So let's remove the false. Let's remove this. The space will be better in black and white with the structure. We looked at it from the top, and we saw that there was a kind of galvanized little I-beam structure very fragile, like just for plasterboard, but it was the only structural element we would be able to reshuffle in the project if we need it. So we cut it and we dismantled slowly. And we said, okay, let's keep with C. It stayed on the wall for a long time, but at the end of the 20 days, we were thinking like, these people, they are in Paris, they speak about inviting 40 people, but it's not easy to have a dinner with 40 people in Paris. Like almost architecturally, there is not many space when you can have a dinner for 40 people. And we said, let's take the plasterboard ceiling, turn it upside down and make a table so that we can have dinner very easily with 40 people. Of course, it's a double sheet of plaster. It's the cheapest material or the not fitting material for doing a table. So we add some layer of boat varnish that is quite hard, and it became the table. We made some lighting. And of course, it was the starting for them to enjoy the project, and they made a lot of dinner, and there is a lot of the family that of the Galerie Lafayette is here, and it happened a lot. What is nice is that actually they liked this period. They were coming with a very expensive new architectural project with moving floors, etc. But for 3 years, they've been using it themselves, and they set up the art foundation into this temporary profile 3 years before the agenda. And at the moment, they kept the name Lafayette Anticipation. So kind of the practicing of a space that was just 20 days of 8 people working on connotation and worshiping the matter that was there had an impact. And the real estate department of Lafayette, which is kind of the main landowner in France, because they have the biggest building on the pedestrian street of every city of France, because basically it became pedestrian because there was Galerie Lafayette. And so they asked to have more collaboration and more talk with us, and they felt really inspired by what happened to them, their own perception and their own enjoyment of the work. I go to another story. This is a project that was made by Tristan and colleagues, but I will try to tell it the way he told it to me. It's in Antwerp, in Belgium, and there is a huge event hall, sports palace, where they can make big concerts like Madonna would come, or there is also the tennis competition. It's one of the big event hall in Brussels, and they need to rebuild a new parking. And so for 8 years, there is no parking space along the facility, and they asked the train station if they could use this piece of land along the train and turn it into a long-term temporary parking. And it was commissioned as a design and build to a technical office that had to design a project and build a parking. But there is in many projects or publicly funded project, this 1% artistic commission that needs to be integrated in the project. And the team of the people in charge of the project, they were wise and aware of the work we do, and they called us and they said, can we ask you to do the 1% work? And we said, let's think. And we suggest, okay, the commission will be a kind of poster at the entrance of the site that says it's a parking, that's the story of the place. But we will engage with you in the conception process in a way that what we show in the drawing is something we think is worth it. So we were not doing the drawing for the drawing, we are doing the drawing as a pretext to engage in the design process. And when we went on site, it was big, and there are some, the event hall is there, the blue roof there. There are some qualities like the length, it's a quality that it's almost 1 kilometer that you don't have in an urban condition very often. And we start to look at what was specific or particular in that project that we could engage with. When you start to work with them, basically that's the kind of definition and document they use in the technical office. And I think Axel has also very beautiful lectures when he can speak this way. And actually, they prefer to talk this way with the Excel sheet rather than the drawing or the presentation. Okay, if you push them, there was a kind of plan like this, the amount of parking they need, and a lot of greenery, which is a kind of fantasy because on over 8 years, there will not be green. But the work of my colleagues was to, okay, let's start to engage with them, and they apply the thinking process. Okay, you want to do a parking. Can we talk about this parking need in a dynamic vision, not in a static vision? You don't need to park, I don't remember the number, but we will have it on the next slide. You don't have Madonna coming every day. Some days there is only a partial use of the space. So let's say that at the entrance, you need always the people walking at least that amount of car. Then you need sometimes more and sometimes more, and sometimes you need it all. Can we talk this way? Okay, that's the plan of the amount of parking you have in your design. And then we play their game, which we look and we revisit their own arguments. Oh, you lost some things. There is a potential for 14 more space here. And there is also the possibility to do 73 more. But then we have an agenda. So can we talk about this 565 place in the dynamic with more openness? And that's about what it is to build a relation with people. And our idea was to kind of have a mineral and a green division of the site along this spine. So next thing, there is just 3 little trees on the site, but they tell us, oh no, it's exactly on the line. If we don't want to lose too many cars, they will need to be demolished. It's not an option. And so Tristan comes very proudly and say, actually, I've calculated with a radius of 20 meters, the cars can turn along the street. Can we implement that in the project? But it seems that they need someone to care enough to do this exercise and to do it. And then for us, it was an exercise of looking at the materiality, looking at what is there on the side. There was a releve. It's not a tabula rasa. It's not empty. There is specific and precisely describable material on the site. And so that was the next level of engagement with the site. And we start to look, okay, there are some materials that have in blue very high quality. The finishing is flat, it's good, it's strong. There are some material that have medium quality, and then some material that have kind of low quality or no quality, and we can understand that it's into the Excel sheet as amount to be processed through the business as usual. And then we put a focus. Can we talk about those 2 areas that have high quality and appreciate the quality they have? Then we mix with the dynamic version. Okay, let's forget about the one that is in the dark orange, but can we be active about this? And then it's been turned into, could we add a sport facility into the area? And we put a fencing system that makes it closed and protected if you don't need full capacity, so you don't have randomly a car coming and blocking this surface. But if you need, we open it and the basket field is not available for tonight. And they agreed. So we started to have a project. A next step for the understanding of the multi-dimension of the project. On that side of the area, there was housing blocks, social housing blocks with a kind of significant quantity of people who've been using the site by trespassing before. And we were thinking, like, they have children, they need to go to the playground or to play in the green every day. Even if Madonna is there, you can cut the basketball, but there are people, there are children, there are people who need to go. So there was a project to put something, and then asking them to modify the land in a way that this area could be protected from the site and could be a full, real dedication to a specific needs and a specific opportunity from the project. And so we start to have the design of the project with an area that is dedicated to its own time frame, but on that zone. And then the project has a potential for maybe a little bit of green, but we know where and how it build up into something, not randomly dispersing green. And they did it, it happened. So that was the project. And so Rotor did its part of the job, which was doing a painting that represents a welcoming park that is shared with the community along being a temporary parking for the facility. And the result has been this kind of thing happening on the site. This area that is ready to park more people, but that feels less like a priority to put cars on it. The 1 kilometer line exists and is an attraction or a quality of the site. Like we see, the trees have been saved. And at the end also, at the time it was still, it seems always very difficult to have reused material in a project, public tender, like technical office design and build. I introduced the lecture saying it's impressive and it's a poster value for us to have it. And actually, when they did the deconstruction, there was this pile of rubble, and Tristan, that we see here with his daughter, actually suggests, can we put them on the side? And the tools were there, they've been put on the side, and actually grass grew into it, and basically this landscaping is done just out of reused material. And so there was no difficulty about it in itself. Okay, I go to another story. This is the model of the building for the Design and Mode Center in Brussels. It's an architectural competition that we won with the Architect Office V+, to make a new center for the mode and the design in the city center. The competition called for demolition of the building and for the production of a new architectural object that was worth the representation of design and mode in Brussels. And somehow, if you think properly, there was €6 million budget. It's not huge budget. It will not be an amazing object of architecture. It will not be an amazing icon that is worth itself in itself. It will be a construction and a little bit of iconicity. And so we propose to enter the competition with the idea that we will keep the 3 existing buildings. They are not special, they are not fancy. We will just make small modification into it, but we took their game, or we took them at their own game, and we said, as a museum, you are kind of in the business of the white box. You are dealing with the white box, but from our perspective as people with care for material and materiality, we know that there is no such thing as the abstract white box. It's white plaster, it's with the scratch or the bump of the people who set up the room. And so we said, we will deliver and we will offer an iconicity to this building by retrofitting, by filling it with a very rich and very large collection of white and white texture. And so we appreciate and we recognize and we made the statement that white is not an idea, an abstract idea, white is material and material are specific thing. And we made the job by calling every company to have the sample of the white sample of their production. And that has been the catalog of material that we use to remake the building and make. There was no opening for reuse material, but that was not the point for us. It was about, of course, reusing the building, but also to solve the problem that was implied by the commission of the competition through material in a sensible way. And so the facade is the same as the original. We just took the white panel of the glass filling. There was a little extension And inside, we use like white flock, white paint, white everything, and we kept the color of the existing material. And in between the two buildings, it became a space, and also again using the white, and the reflection of white kind of is a white, and so on, and that's what the building is. And I will take a last story. Maybe it's a bit taking us a bit away from the field of architecture, but actually I'm happy to explain the story because we felt confident about doing that project or supporting this project in the office. It's mostly Lionel de Vlieger who wrote and lead that project. But the story is what's eating the Chinese meat and crab, and who's eating the Chinese meat and crab. And actually, we've been invited to do a contribution to the Bruges Triennale of Art and Architecture, or Bruges Triennale of Architecture. And we started, like you could expect from a Rotor perspective, remembering, oh, 3 years ago, Bauweisen made a pavilion, and we knew that the material had been collected. And so let's explore what are the materials that have been collected. Let's ask. And when we called the guy who had been doing the demounting, and he explained us about the material from the Bauweisen pavilion, he told us, oh, you know what was very special or exceptional when we demounted this pavilion? Actually, it was the crabs. The crabs were all around, in between. And actually, the waters of Bruges are invaded by crabs. And actually, those crabs, when it's their time, they climb on the building. And the story was like suddenly much more impressive than the collection of the material that have been saved from the pavilion of Bauweisen. And then they explained very soon that the crabs are, the authority put piège, I don't know, say a trap, in the river along Bruges to capture them so that they climb, and actually they are taken and burned in the cement oven because you need to move them. And so we are like, oh, this is kind of, it started to be a story. So that became the project. We will talk about those crabs, and we will do a contribution to the architecture field and discipline and talk through them. So at Rotor, we invited the crabs in the office. We lived with them. They had photo shoot on the dining table. Sébastien, who is one of the colleagues, but it happens that he's an oceanographer also by training, was very happy suddenly to do his skills in the office. The model table at the office was to capture this. And actually, the story of the crabs is a known story. It's actually since the beginning of the previous century, we find them in the connection to Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And the idea is that they came with this boat, or this kind of boat, but because it's a kind of boat that traveled between China and Belgium, but they used to have water to make the stabilization in their belly. And so they dropped the water on the other side. And the beginning of the invasion of the species came. And so we can see that in 1912, the first Chinese meat and crab are found there in Germany, and 1901 is the time of the boat that came. And so there is an investigation that kind of makes sense. Funnily, in 1939, like before the Second World War, they became Japanese crabs, because it seems that we had problem with the Japanese at the moment, so they were the Japanese crabs. But actually, the true or the story is that they are Chinese crab. They come from the Chinese River Delta, which is a very similar configuration, and they traveled with the boat. They arrived in our region, and they developed, and they became an invasive species that we discovered about at the moment. And nowadays they travel back with airplane. Because actually in the Netherlands, we have this kind of fishermen who are cultivating them as a delicacy and preparing them for them to finish their grow in China, where they are eaten as delicacy. And the stories start to be strong about like globalization, the time perspective, the perception, the definition, the words we put on those things. And so the project team at Rotor said, okay, can we do an exhibition about that? And can we choose specifically this building? Because this building is the Commerce Tower in Bruges. And actually, it's a kind of infrastructure for the global trade at the time. It allows people to go on top and see the boat coming and start the trade before other people know it in the city. And so we receive a room there, and the work of the research was displayed as an exhibition, and the piece of evidence to tell the story properly has been put together here. And the crabs also have been showcased in the film. And that's the main story. But along that, Rotor was also commissioned to do a small pavilion on the beach side in Belgium. And the team chose to turn this pavilion into a gastronomic restaurant that invited every second week a renowned chef to cook invasive species. And so they made that, and the crabs was eaten as a proper resource. And that's it. Maybe I want to say that we are a group of people dedicating our interests, our preoccupation with the same question you are engaging with the year, with this constraint of beyond concrete. And we happen to enjoy a lot the work we do. Maybe something what was said to me when I gave a lecture some years ago, it was that it feels like the work we do happens thanks to a very fluid interdisciplinarity. And kind of interdisciplinarity is asked by many fields, but we never really know how to start it, how to do it. And it's true that we have many different profiles. Some of us, the architectural training, but they are very different profiles. And I feel that Rotor is maybe an invitation or a remember to let setting up possibility of more fluid interdisciplinarity around your work and around your investigation. I would not have the skills at all to see the lichens, but I was totally skillful to listen to Lionel and capture the fascination and the interest. And I wish you a bit of that.
Thank you so much for this very different and even more interesting view on recirculation. So I'm sure there will be one or the other question from the audience. Harald?
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting and inspiring lecture. Thank you very much. I do have just one, I have several questions, but I will keep it short. First of all, what I would be interested in, you showed the story about the tiles in the beginning, and then you told us about the reuse, and we saw how they were laid out in this space. Are you thinking about also the next generation using them again in about 50 years and taking them out? So you're using a special kind of cement in order to minimize the work for future generations for the reuse, just like a very idealistic view on this thing. So this would be a question. While you were showing this story about the tiles, you also did this research on the product catalog from many years before. That made me think about a strategy which we know from conservation departments all over Europe, where they were just collecting historical material for renovation stuff. So did you have any kind of relationship to that idea, which conservation departments already have done for many decades?
Mm-hmm.
And as an historian, I can be very romantic. So my future view on how we work and how we live, if we think about digitalization, many people will lose their work, and on the other hand, we need people to give them a kind of a possibility to have a senseful work. And all this work you showed in the beginning, to me, seems a very labor-intensive work. So would you think that there is a future, I call it market, for people who might work there as a in this very labor-intensive field?
Okay. Okay. That's really interesting question. There will be one table just after, so we can also develop together on the question and the answer. And Tristan will also join one of the table, so you can also have even more of Rotor point of view. The first question about the mortar in the project, I'm not sure I even feel that in the project it was used by client. Was not a reversible mortar, but I was very happy to hear Kerstin highlighting that in the Nest building, they piled the roof tiles, aware that they could use a mortar that is not problematic. And maybe one third tool that I can share with the student within the framework of the Interreg FCRBE research project that occupied a large part of Rotor for the last 3 years. We've developed a series of fish, like file for specific materials where we've been able to study with much more precision, because each material, and there was a large quantity, would benefit from a very specific exploration, and we are not in capacity to do it for all of the material. And there are some work that has been done by the colleagues on the reversible assembly for mortar specifically. And also there is a specific document about this kind of ceramic tiles. So what is the definition of ceramic tiles? What are the families that are possible to treat with the specific process? Because very soon we have a confusion in the conversation, because we mix cement tiles with ceramic tiles, but actually if you put the cement tiles in the acid, you don't have nothing. And so it needs kind of a nomenclature and precision that is still a bit lacking. And so we have some contribution that specifically answer to your question because it's this case, but it does not answer to all the variation of the question you could have asked. The second question was, yeah, conservation department. Yeah, yes, and not enough. I mean, we would love to have more opportunity to engage. Most of the work that has been done by Rotor is done through commission. We've received commission. Maybe because there is some attention on the work we do, we receive call. We've never really been proactive to look for a job, but when there are job who comes, we try to turn them into something that feeds the research or the exploration we want to do or to pursue while doing the commission. And we have very few times received some funding or research funding. It happens more recently, but mostly we've worked by going through the commission. And so we have not enough did not have enough opportunity to connect with the this kind of department. We have a colleague which is kind of fundamental at Rotor, which is Lionel de Vlieger, who did the work on the Quab, who is an architectural historian, and he has this kind of facility to go for that and to think about that, to explore that, and to integrate it in the collective thinking and the work we have. And at the moment, since September, Lionel has been is taking a position of professor at the University of Ghent to work specifically on the history of materials and to explore with the student. But out of the richness of the work he has done and we have done together through 15 years of Rotor, so it's kind of looking past but also looking forward. So no, but for sure there is a lot there that is still rich for Rotor, but also like would be rich for Rotor, but actually it's available and not enough tapped in for the question we are having. And the third one was, yeah, and the digitalization and people losing. I don't know. That's, I mean, but what I know, we have a generation of young collaborators coming and joining us, and we are 35 at the moment, but we have people who came in and out, and for ourselves, and it feels that we have a generation who was very happy to be a bit less in front of the computer. And all of these questions prove that decision-making cannot happen through this level of abstraction when we speak about materials. And the people who joined at Rotor with skills that are beyond the needs of the task, but are become very useful when we call for interdisciplinarity. They are often very talented people, but who have an affinity to engage with a diversity of skill set in their professional engagement. And it's true when I'm on the deconstruction side, I maybe don't have the same efficiency or labor cost value when I do the demounting, but actually it's something amazing to do. Just you learn a lot. You learn a lot about architecture. There is also something that is in the Italian project that I invited you to explore. There is a kind of material time when you take a specific amount of time to demount a stone or to scratch it, or just to walk to the distance of a project, your thinking starts to be different. In fast talk, we have preconceived idea, but after you've lost them because you've been spending too much time, you start to conceive other ideas. And so I believe it's very rich to have those purposeful or hours of work independently of the value that is associated to them today. So I have the feeling that the next generation is probably more aware of that than the generation we studied at the end of the 90s. And it was the age of information, computer, there was development into that. But it's maybe, there is still a huge in circular economy trend and work on trading the information. Because we are, a lot of us, skillful in optimizing and harvesting, and there is new tools to trade information, like database, big data, capturing of information, and some progress can be done that. But from our work and from our perspective, which is just what it is, but we feel that there is still a huge quantity of advancement that does not happen at that level. And so maybe the relevance of working on another dimension will appear by itself, or is there, and you understand. Okay, good.